Good evening and welcome back to Shae Unfiltered. Today we'll be diving into a fiery debate between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray on Israel, Hamas and the Gaza blockade. I've watched it through and to be perfectly candid, I think it was a case of facts versus feelings. I won't say too much about it, especially after the statement Dave Smith made about Douglas Murray when he and Piers ganged up on Natasha Housestuff.
Right, so listen to what they say.
You wouldn't take your word for it. It sounds like a lot of old bullshit again.
Well,
Dave.
listen, Piers, as I've dealt with this argument with Douglas Murray and now here today.
Without further ado, let's roll the clip and we shall break it down afterwards.
And I think that people have been indoctrinated by very bad actors into this, and as a result have excused atrocities or will make excuses for them, make excuses for the people who do them. I think, in addition, it plays to some of the darkest things of the regional mind as well as the international mind. The aims of Hamas, their stated aims, include the annihilation of the Jewish people. And October the 7th, they had their best go at doing that. And the fact that in a decision between whether or not you're on the side of the people who want to dance and live in peace with their neighbors, or whether you're on the side of the people who want to rampage through a dance party bar in the early morning, macheteing at people, I find it amazing that there are so many people who don't know which side they're on. But there are a lot of them. There are a lot of reasons for that. But one of the foremost reasons is the fact that the state of Israel has been uniquely libeled, has been uniquely lied about. Its history has been uniquely lied about. It has been uniquely put under an international spotlight and then misrepresented in a way which I cannot think of many other countries in the world that have been treated that way. And there are deep reasons for it and shallow reasons for it. The deep reasons include some of the most ancient bigotries of the human heart, and the shallow reasons are people who don't know what the hell they're talking about.
You have to give it to Douglas Murray. He's very knowledgeable, and from the way he talks, you know that he's researched intensively into the topics that he talks about.
Okay, I think that look, I'm not going to speak for what every person out there believes. I don't exactly agree with the characterization that there was no outpouring of feeling after October 7th. And certainly everybody I know was just oh my God, this is a horrific atrocity and an unprecedented terrorist attack from Hamas, the worst terrorist attack in Israeli history against Israelis. And it was horrible. I think what a lot of I'm not arguing that there are no people who are actually pro-Hamas or there are no people who are actually hate Jews or something like that. I do think that what happens is that a lot of people get put in that category who do not belong there. Much like we've seen this over the last year and a half where a lot of people, you have John Podhoretz calling Thomas Massie anti-Semitic scum because he said, we're dead broke. We can't afford to fund everybody else's war here. People have been calling Tucker Carlson anti-Semitic all over the place. When these are two guys, Thomas Massie and Tucker Carlson, who have never uttered the words "the Jews" in their life. They're just not anti-Semites at all. So there's a lot of people, I think, who are, when they're critical of the Israeli government's response to this, get lumped in as pro-Hamas. I will certainly say that's certainly not my position. I think your description of them, death cult, by the way, the same term that Daryl Cooper used to describe Hamas, I think is an accurate one. And it was horrible. But I think that I think that your characterization, first of all, of that they gave the Palestinians a state in 2005 is just wrong. I just think that is not at all an accurate way to describe the disengagement, which we could get into more if you want to. But first of all, I would just point out that if the two-state solution was achieved, I assume you're arguing it was taken away after that. You're not still arguing that the Palestinians have a state, or are you saying they have had a state since 2005?
They were given a state in the Gaza.
And when was it taken away?
Well, they kind of screwed it up for themselves on the 7th of October.
So you're saying from 2005 all the way till October 7th, there was a two-state solution. It had been achieved.
Well, it was another state, yeah.
Oh, okay, but that would be two states then.
No, it
would
was
be
another state. It was different from the PA.
Okay, right, but I'm saying a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's interesting about that is that this is not how this is not how any of the leaders really describe it. I mean, when Netanyahu himself is not claiming that they had already achieved a two-state solution, why are you talking about this? What happened in 2005 in the disengagement was that essentially Israel went from occupying the place to surrounding the place. And they've had it under a brutal blockade since 2007. And yes, you were right that it was...
Why do you... I don't agree the blockade was brutal by any means.
You don't think the blockade of Gaza was brutal?
I mean, how brutal do you think the Egyptians are?
Pretty brutal. Yeah.
They allowed stuff in.
Okay. I mean, since some stuff has gotten in, yes, that's true.
Since more than some.
Let's just take that back a little bit.
How brutal do you think the Egyptians are?
Pretty brutal. Yeah.
They allowed stuff in.
Okay. I mean, since some stuff has gotten in, yes, that's true.
More than some stuff.
Okay.
More than some stuff.
Okay. I'll say this, right, because there's been different levels of blockade, even before 2007, going back. I know in 1996, they had like a pretty strong blockade that year. According to the World Bank, it contracted 40% of the GDP of Gaza. So just for reference, the Great Depression was a 30% contraction. This was in 1996. For 1 year, they gave them something worse than our Great Depression. That was just 1 year. From 2007 on, there's been a blockade of that country. You don't think that's kept the country poor?
Why do you think there's a blockade of any kind?
Why is there a blockade? Well, I mean, the argument from Israel would be...
No, why do you think?
I would say, okay, I think that the disengagement, I think Smotrich was correct when he said that, I'm sorry, my mistake there. I think which another quote that I'm sure you're familiar with, but Dov Weissklaff, who was the senior advisor to Sharon, was the prime minister at the time, he essentially said the reason we're doing the disengagement, the reason we're doing this is so that we can put the peace process in formaldehyde. This is the reason we're doing it.
You're not answering my question. You're
yes,
continuing
to
cite
I'm getting
very right-wing Israeli politicians. But what do you think is the reason?
I'm getting there. I'm saying, so I think they disengaged in order to kill the peace process. I think they put the full blockade around the country for the reason that they've always kind of done it there, that, yeah, they don't want too much stuff getting in. They want to keep them, as they put it, on a diet, and they don't want rockets to fly into Israel.
The second one is a kind of important one, isn't it, the final
yeah,
one you said?
It is.
If the Palestinian leadership in Gaza after 2005 had not from the get-go decided to use Gaza as a stockpiling place for rockets to fire into Israel, all of it would be different. If they had just resisted the temptation that so many of us do in our lives to stop keeping RPGs in our cellars and then Katyusha rockets in our children's bedrooms, all of it could have been different. If that desire to live in peace beside your neighbors had superseded the desire to stockpile rockets, it would all be different.
Yeah, or if Israel just hadn't occupied them for 60 years, it would all be different too. I mean, why is it the onus always on them?
Well, you believe in self-determination, I'm sure. Yes.
I believe in individual rights, yeah, sure.
Okay, individual rights. And that includes the right to make bad decisions. Sure. Yes. The Palestinians in Gaza, when they voted in Hamas, made a very bad decision.
Yeah, of course,
and
Douglas.
Hang on. And in the years after that, they made bad decision after bad decision. It was a very bad decision to continually fire thousands of rockets into Israel. It was a very bad decision to use what boats came in early on and to use the smuggling networks from Egypt, not to bring in supplies that you could actually build a thriving society with, but to bring in rockets. It was a very bad idea. No, there was not starvation in Gaza after 2005. No, there was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times.
There was no deficit?
No, there are
no
plenty
goods were kept out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed?
I just had to pause and laugh at that. I had to pause and laugh at that again. That was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant by Douglas Murray. the way he calmly states his facts, the way he spits it with surgical precision. He knows what he's saying. He knows his facts. He's done his research. He's very well versed in that area. And he's touched the ground. He's been there. When he talks about the situation there is because he's experienced it firsthand. I'm not saying he lives in Gaza or Israel to experience this, but he went there to see what was going on as he speaks about it. The shock on his face when he said, you've never been there at all. And you speak about it, you're putting aside with so much heart and so much soul, but you've not been there. How does that make sense to you, mate? And that ultimately put him on the defensive.
Plenty of
There was
times.
no deficit?
No, there are
No
plenty
goods were
of,
kept out?
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been.
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? I've never been to. Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you
Well,
can.
right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
No,
okay.
I find that
Lots
very...
of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so I
if
don't
you're
know
going
what
to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
all right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't
but
think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert...
Well, you have to go and touch the ground to
No,
be
I
able
think
talk
you have
about
to
it?
see... I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you
okay.
spend a career talking about something. Yes. I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay.
It's a
But that's
sort of
not
normal, it's a normal thing to do. You're talking about... Hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I think this is a non-argument. I don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument if you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any of this going on.
So you're not
That's
allowed to
amazing
speak
to
about
me.
things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want, as you're proving. But that is a different matter.
Wait, stop it. I just have to laugh. I have to laugh. Douglas Murray is English through and through. You can hear it from his dry sarcasm. He's such an intellectual.
From spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit, whilst developing all of these views about it. I mean, now I slightly get an idea of where you're coming from. You've read about this blockade, and so you imagine that that's what it is. I imagine you've read all the people who say that Gaza was a concentration camp, and you probably think that too. Am I right?
I mean, again, literally a concentration camp. It shares a lot of similarities, I would think.
Wow. Well, as I say, you can't time travel
Let's go
back to the
back to the
Nazi era.
let's
but
go
you
back to
could
the
go
blockade.
to the Middle
Okay.
East and actually visit it.
Okay,
It's
the
not
World
hard to
World
do.
Bank said in 1996 for the
Now
one
the
year of the
libertarians
blockade.
are quoting the World Bank. I love it.
It doesn't mean anything. This is a non-argument. Yes, I'm saying the World Bank did their own analysis of this, and they said that
Why
it was a
don't
40%
you do your
of
own analysis?
Hold on. You
Jesus
got to
Christ.
stop interrupting
Okay.
and let him finish
I
the
will.
sentence.
The
Fire
World
away.
Bank said that 40% drop in the GDP of 1 year due to the blockade. And there's been a blockade from 2007 on. So are you saying that this hasn't had an economic effect? Is that the argument?
No, of course it'll have an economic effect.
So you're saying
But-
you have to be on the ground and do an audit of the blockade
No.
in order to be able to
I
comment
think
on
you
it?
should at least know what it is, what the territory is, what the situation is in the region. Yes, absolutely.
And the only way
Absolutely.
to do that is to be there in person.
I think that's the best way. It's not the only way, but it's the best way, for sure. For sure. If you have never seen the countries in question, you've never spoken to the people in question, you've never interviewed anyone, you've never gone around, you've never seen the terrain, and so on, and you've used Wikipedia, I'm sorry, no, that's not the same thing.
Okay, well, I've not just used Wikipedia, but didn't you write a big piece when the war in Ukraine first came out titled something like, I've been to Ukraine and they can win, they can repel the Russians? So you could go there and still get it wrong, right?
No, I was with the Ukrainian armed forces in 2022 when they were retaking territory from the Russians.
Right, the last time they had any advances,
Yeah,
right.
I said I can see how they can win, which would be advances like that, yeah.
You said if we just fund them, or if we just arm them, that they can then
they can
repel.
I said that the Ukrainian army was making great successes, which it was when I was with them in the fall of 22.
Okay, listen, there were lots of people who went to Iraq and said we'll be greeted as liberators and it'll be paid for in oil and democracy will spread through the region. So I don't know, either take on the arguments or don't, but I don't think
but your argument's incorrect.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, then present a counter argument to it. But to just tell me I'm not allowed to talk about something because I'm not an expert.
You're not allowed to talk
okay, fine. Well, you're not
an
an expert, so you shouldn't talk about it. You haven't been there. Yeah, I know. But you keep playing this game where it's like the whole opening to this podcast was like the non-experts talking about this is such a problem. Now you're saying because I haven't been there, I can't talk about it. Is there a blockade there that's causing economic devastation or not? According to the World Bank, there is.
First of all, I don't think it's a game. I don't think it's a game at all.
Me neither.
I'm not playing a game. Okay,
but this is semantics.
No, but this is important. I've seen plenty of this up close. I've seen plenty of this with my own eyes because I do believe that one of the things you should do if you're talking about something is to see it.
Yeah, you've established that. Is there a blockade?
The blockade that existed, to the extent it existed, was a blockade to try to make sure that the Israelis and the Egyptians knew what materials were going in and out of Gaza after the first rocket fires when Hamas, in fact, before Hamas was elected. The Israelis and the Egyptians didn't do a very good job of it, were meant to be trying to make sure that the materials that went into Gaza were not materials that could be used to build up the Gazan Hamas war machine. The reason why trucks get searched is not because the Israelis want to search through grain or flour. It's because they wanted to stop the trucks containing the arms and the munitions that the Gazan Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters were going to use to fire against Israel. And I'm sorry, it just makes the most obvious strategic sense. As the late great Joan Rivers once said, if as an appeal to authority.
That one I'll allow. That one I like.
She also said that Michelle Obama's a man.
Yeah, I know, she did that.
No, I'm saying she got everything right. So continue. Go ahead.
But as Joan Rivers said, if New York was being rocketed from New Jersey, we would level New Jersey. I don't think you need to level it, by the way. But you would at least try to make sure that rockets weren't being imported in larger quantities into New Jersey.
Of course.
Okay, that's all the Israelis were doing.
Wow. Okay. Like I've said many times, this is not about taking sides at all. All right. But listening to their arguments for the both of them, I would say Douglas Murray's argument was very compelling. He has the facts and he's been there. His feet has touched the ground. He's not just talking about something that he read about. He's not just making opinions from the news. He went there for himself to see it, to feel it, to smell it. All right. That is what gave him the upper hand in this conversation. And if you watch this clip carefully, you'll notice how Dave Smith was rattled because he knew that he didn't stand a chance. Now, I would say this is like taking a knife to a gunfight. You see, Douglas was very well prepared for this. I'm not saying Dave Smith is completely wrong. Dave had a lot of points as well. He was approaching it from a humanitarian angle because, as you know, in conflicts like this, it's the innocents that suffer most. Something that really makes me sad is how human lives are counted as collateral damage, which is really unfair. People are reduced to numbers, you know. It's quite painful when you think about it. There's a lot of suffering in Palestine. There's a lot of suffering in Gaza, which is unnecessary. I think it's something that the whole communities, something that the whole world needs to come together to stop, rather than everybody taking sides. But with what we've seen happening on the streets of the Western world, that has become the case. People are taking sides without having accurate facts. They're just reading information online and they're running with it without doing proper research. They're believing everything. They're swallowing it all up. Okay? That is something that needs to stop. That is how disinformation keeps getting spread. When people read about conflicts and start imagining things. You see, Douglas decided to go there and see for himself. So you have a real feel of it so that it wouldn't be second-hand opinion. After hearing about it, after reading about it, he went there and now he has his own first-hand information because he's seen it, he's felt it, he's lived it, he's breathed it, he's smelt it. You know what I mean? And he was really right to address Dave Smith the way he did, telling him that you've spent over a year and a half talking about an issue and you've not been there, you've not gone to see for yourself with your own eyes. In all this time that you're talking and taking, a very strong stance and making very strong statements about the land, you need to at least do the courtesy of visiting the place. It only but makes sense, if you ask my opinion. Basically, it's not about who was wrong or who was right, because they were having a debate for progressiveness, for a better future. I think the point that Dave is missing there is that Israel had to put those measures in place because of the risk to their existence. Someone was asking, someone was saying that what would happen if Israel dropped their weapons? It decided that, okay, we agreed. The only way to have peace is if we drop our weapons. Now, history has told us, if they mistakenly drop their weapons, there will be no Israel right now. Why? The amount of missiles that are being thrown into Israel. I've had a lot of conversations with people that are living in Israel right now. I've had video calls with them. In fact, I was on a live video with someone and suddenly she had to run. She said, oh, missile alert, that she had to leave. I was like, oh, okay, how long? She was like, oh, she has 2 minutes. I think she said she had, was it 2-3 minutes? She left. She just went straight to the safe room. And I was looking, what came to my mind was, wow, we living in the Western world, we know nothing about the dangers in that place. You do not know anything at all. If you don't leave, if you don't walk in the shoes of the Palestinians or the shoes of the Israelis, you wouldn't know. If you don't actively engage or speak with someone that lives in the place as things are happening, you wouldn't understand. All right, you wouldn't understand the situation. So it's a dire situation. It's a very serious situation. It's a situation of life or death. The amount of people dying, we're hearing numbers and numbers and numbers. 20,000 people, 30,000 people, this and that, going on and on. All right, it is a very serious situation. How can it stop if the aggressors decide to stop? But I implore people, rather than dividing us more, rather than taking sides, which adds more fuel to the fire, rather than helping the situation, we need to come together, dialogue, and find a solution and not worsen what's going on there already. Anyway, it's been your boy, guys. Let me know what you think about this debate. Does Murray's view on Israel's security measures make sense? Or do you agree with Dave Smith's humanitarian concerns? Do let me know in the comment section and we shall discuss further. Peace.
More than words can say, you are me. Oh, you are the light that shines in my way. You are me.